Caught my wife red-handed with her affair partner at cheap motel. It was supposed to be a normal Wednesday evening. I had just finished a long day at work, the kind that leaves you drained and longing for the comfort of home. My wife, Jenna, had texted earlier saying she'd be working late on a project with a colleague. I didn't think much of it. Jenna had always been dedicated to her job, and I respected that about her. But something about that evening felt off. Maybe it was the tone of her text, short, almost rushed, or maybe it was the fact that she had been pulling a lot of late nights lately. I tried to shake the uneasy feeling, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. After all, we had been married for 8 years. We had built a life together, a life I thought was solid and unshakable. Still, as the hours ticked by and her usual good-night call never came, the nagging doubt grew louder. I decided to give her a quick call to check in. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. "Hey, babe. Just wanted to see how your night's going. Call me when you get a chance," I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the tightness in my chest, but she never called back. By midnight, I was pacing the living room, my mind racing. Was she okay? Had something happened? My imagination spiraled from one worst-case scenario to another. Then, almost as an afterthought, I decided to check the location-sharing app we had both installed on our phones a few years ago. That's when my world tilted. Instead of being at her office or on her usual route home, her pin was at a seedy motel on the outskirts of town. At first, I stared at the screen, convinced it had to be a mistake. Maybe she had been in an accident and stopped there for help? Or maybe her phone was stolen and the thief had taken it there. My mind clung to every possible explanation except the obvious one, the one I couldn't bear to entertain. But as I sat there, staring at the glowing red pin on the map, a cold clarity began to settle over me. There was no innocent explanation for this. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted for nearly a decade, was at a cheap motel in the middle of the night. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed my car keys and drove, the anger building with each passing mile. I didn't even know what I was going to say or do when I got there, but I couldn't sit at home, paralyzed by suspicion. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. When I pulled into the motel's parking lot, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The neon sign flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on the rundown building. The lot was almost empty, except for a few scattered cars, one of which I immediately recognized, Jenna's. I parked a few spaces away and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My hands were trembling, and my mind raced through 1,000 scenarios. What if I was wrong? What if this was all some huge misunderstanding? But deep down, I already knew the answer. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the building, each step heavier than the last. The receptionist barely glanced at me as I passed, too engrossed in her phone to notice the storm brewing inside me. Then, as I approached the door to room 214, I heard it. A muffled laugh, followed by Jenna's voice, unmistakable and full of a warmth I hadn't heard directed at me in months. My stomach twisted into knots. I raised my hand to knock but hesitated, the weight of what I was about to do pressing down on me. This was the moment. Once I opened that door, there was no going back. Taking a deep breath, I knocked hard. The laughter inside stopped abruptly. A moment later, the door opened, and there she was, Jenna, standing in front of me in nothing but a bathrobe, her eyes wide with shock. Behind her, a man I didn't recognize was scrambling to pull on his clothes, his face pale as a ghost. "Well," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and heartbreak, "aren't you going to invite me in?" "Jake, Jenna started, but I didn't let her finish. "Save it!" I snapped, pushing past her into the room. The man, her affair partner, stood there awkwardly, half-dressed and avoiding eye contact. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my voice rising. I didn't know she was married," he stammered, grabbing his shoes and bolting for the door like a coward. Once he was gone, I turned to Jenna, who was still standing there, clutching her robe tightly around her. "So this is what working late looks like?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Jake, please," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I can explain." "Explain what?" I shot back, my voice cracking. "Explain how you've been sneaking around behind my back? How you've been lying to me, to our family?" She sank onto the edge of the bed, burying her face in her hands. "It's not what you think," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I think? Not what I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You're sitting in a motel room with another man, Jenna. What am I supposed to think?" For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the motel's air conditioner. Then finally, she looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I never meant for you to find out like this." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. "Find out like this?" I repeated. "So you were planning on me finding out eventually? When? After you'd had your fun?" "It's not like that," she insisted. I wasn't happy, Jake. I haven't been happy for a long time." I stared at her, my chest heaving. "And instead of talking to me about it, instead of trying to fix things, you decided to throw everything we've built away for this?" I gestured around the dingy motel room, my voice dripping with disdain. She flinched at my words, but didn't deny them. Instead, she said, "I didn't know how to tell you. You've been so distant lately, so wrapped up in work. I felt like I didn't matter to you anymore." Her words stung because there was some truth to them. I had been working long hours, trying to provide for our family, but I never thought for a second that it would push her into someone else's arms. "Do you even regret it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, and in that hesitation I got my answer. "You don't, do you?" I said, the realization cutting me like a knife. "You don't regret what you did. You just regret getting caught." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "That's not true, Jake. I still love you." I laughed bitterly. "You have a funny way of showing it." The drive home was silent, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on us like a suffocating blanket. When we got there, I went straight to the guest room, leaving Jenna to cry alone in the dark. The silence between Jenna and me in the days that followed was suffocating. Every word she said, every tear she shed seemed hollow to me. How could I trust her again after what I had just witnessed? The betrayal ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. But as she begged for my forgiveness, part of me wanted to believe that we could fix this, that this was some horrible mistake we could move past. Yet, another part of me, the part that had been so blindsided by the harsh truth, wanted to shut her out completely. My anger, confusion, and heartbreak consumed me. I couldn't just forget. I couldn't turn off the image of her with another man, smiling and laughing in that motel room. "I can't believe you," I told her on the second night after I found out, my voice trembling with a combination of fury and sorrow. "How could you do this to me? To us?" Jenna had been crying non-stop since we returned home, and at this point her face was raw from the constant tears. But when she tried to reach for me to comfort me, I pulled back. There was no comfort for me anymore. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen. I made a mistake. Please, Jake, we can fix this. We can work through this." I stared at her, my heart hardening with each pleading word. The desperation in her voice cut through me, but not in the way it used to. This time, I didn't feel like I was the one who could be saved. She was the one who had betrayed us, and now I was the one who needed to escape her broken promises. "Fix it?" I scoffed. "You think we can fix this? You think I can just forget what you did? You think I can just act like nothing happened?" Jenna nodded eagerly, her eyes wide with hope. "We can go to therapy. We can—" "No," I interrupted, shaking my head. "I don't want to hear it. You don't get to just brush this under the rug like it's nothing. This is everything. You cheated on me, Jenna. You betrayed me in the worst way possible." She collapsed on the couch, her body shaking as sobs racked through her. The guilt was written all over her face, but the part of me that once would have consoled her now felt numb. I had nothing left to give her, not after what I had seen, not after what she had done. "What happened to us, Jenna?" I asked, my voice quieter now, defeated. "We used to be happy. We used to talk. You were my best friend, my partner. And now I don't even recognize you." Jenna's sobs grew louder, and she crawled over to where I stood, reaching out for me. But I couldn't look at her, couldn't let her touch me. She had crossed a line I couldn't go back from. "I know," she said between her tears. "I know I messed up. I know I've ruined everything. But I love you, Jake. I swear, I love you. I made a mistake. Please give me a chance to make it right." I looked at her, and the pain of it all flooded back to me. For a moment, I was paralyzed by the memories of the life we had built together, how we had laughed, how we had dreamed of our future. But those dreams were shattered now. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if I even wanted to. "We can't fix this," I said finally, my voice cold. "Not anymore. You've broken something that can't be repaired. It's not just about you and me anymore. It's about what you've done to us." She fell silent, staring at me in disbelief. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the motel room. The betrayal so raw and vivid in my mind that I could almost feel the sting of it all over again. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Should I stay and try to work through this, knowing it would never be the same? Or should I leave and start over? I couldn't escape the thought that leaving would be the hardest decision I'd ever made, but perhaps it was the only choice that would set me free. Jenna's attempts to apologize grew more desperate. She even wrote me a letter, professing her love and regret, saying how she had felt lonely and neglected in our marriage. She claimed she had made a terrible mistake and didn't know how she had ended up in that motel room, but no matter how heartfelt the words seemed, it didn't change the fact that she had cheated, that she had let another man into our life. "You weren't happy?" I asked her when I finally got the courage to face her once more. "You think that excuses everything? What about me? What about us?" She looked away, tears streaking down her face. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know what else to do. I felt so alone, like you weren't there for me. I needed someone to listen, to care." I nodded slowly, though every word she said felt like a knife twisting deeper into me. I had been there for her. I had been her rock, but she had wanted more, wanted something I hadn't been able to give her, something I never thought she would go looking for elsewhere. "You should have talked to me, Jenna," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "You should have told me how you were feeling. I would have listened." She was silent for a long moment before she finally spoke. "I didn't know how to, Jake. I didn't think you'd understand. You were always so caught up in your work. I felt invisible." The truth of her words stung, but it wasn't enough to make me forget what she had done. I couldn't forgive her yet, not when the scars of her betrayal were still fresh and bleeding. "I've heard enough," I said, standing up from the couch. "You made your choice, and now I have to make mine." For the first time in days, I felt clear-headed. I couldn't let myself be swayed by her tears or her apologies. What we had was over. It wasn't just about her mistake. It was about the fact that I couldn't live in a relationship built on lies, on deceit. I had to move on, no matter how painful it was. "Jake," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "Please don't leave me. I love you." I looked at her one last time. My wife, the woman I thought I knew. But the person in front of me wasn't her. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't even recognize. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "But it's over." And with that, I walked away.